Warhammer Chaosbane lays the foundation for what could be a real contender against the king of action RPGs, Diablo 3. It feels great to play with satisfyingly snappy combat and hordes of loot. Whilst the game leaps to take the title, it does end up missing the gold due to some elements not quite hitting the mark. You'll pick from one of 4 characters: the Empire Soldier, High Elf Mage, Dwarven Slayer, or the Wood Elf Scout, each with their own approach to combat and individual skills with plenty of unique progression routes for all. Whilst the Empire Soldier provides a tankier sword and board style approach with his shield, the Dwarven Slayer likes to get stuck into the thick of things with dual axes, and the High Elf Mage can manually control his powerful spells. The Wood Elf Scout, however, is all about avoiding combat with a nimble roll and ranged slowing attacks. Anyone who's played Diablo 3 or other action RPG titles for that matter will feel right at home with the game's combat and overall movement. Chaosbane's action feels responsive and satisfying, whether you're utilising a mouse and keyboard or a gamepad. Unlike games like Path of Exile, the gamepad movement and actions in Chaosbane feel like you have direct control of your character, as opposed to emulated mouse clicks, much like Diablo 3's superb console ports. Whopping great hordes of enemies is where Chaosbane is at its finest. There's often massive numbers of enemies on screen and damage numbers flying everywhere, and plenty of gratifying attack sounds and blood splatters. Developer Echo Software have nailed that all-important feeling of feedback, which can make or break games like this. Something that, interestingly enough, I actually had issue with when I played the game months ago in its beta form. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the team had really taken on the feedback here. As you slay enemy after enemy, there's that all-important chance of loot dropping. The loot is instant and specific to your character, so there's no fear of frenemies stealing your precious drops. Whilst the loot itself is plentiful from commons to rares and heroics, it's certainly an area of the game that I have issues with. The loot drops offer increasingly powerful statistical benefits, with a fairly straightforward, easy to read at a glance way of determining if a piece of gear is better or worse than the one that you're already wearing. Unfortunately though, the loot is pretty much just that, consistently scaling statistical benefits. The vast majority of the drops you'll come across simply just increase those numbers. Whilst the heroics at endgame do begin to provide various set bonuses, introducing more build specific benefits, your gear on the fairly lengthy journey throughout the game just feels a little lifeless. Other games in the genre often deliver tidbits of mythical goodness throughout the game to spice things up. Chaosbane, however, largely just backloads these, instead throwing in a whole bunch of randomly generated generic gear with underwhelming visuals. That moment that I switched my common sword out for a rare sword, and despite the numerous stat bonuses, it literally looked and performed identical, albeit with a slightly larger number attached to it, certainly didn't feel all that rewarding. This variety is a core problem with Chaosbane in general. You'll adventure through 4 distinct areas, including bleak sewers, ruins of the city Prague, and snow-covered forests. Regardless of how many times you return back to each region's hub area to receive your next quest, back you'll go, venturing into the same feeling combat areas, which end up looking extremely familiar. In the first few hours, you'll visit the same looking sewers so many times, it's almost like the game is just trying its hardest to make you feel a little bored. Thankfully, the skill system quickly becomes far more interesting than it initially seems. You have a preset number of skill points, of which you'll gain more throughout the story and via leveling up. Equipping a skill costs a certain amount of skill points to do so. Even if you've unlocked a more powerful version of your attack, this new version of that skill will cost more to equip than its predecessor. Finding that balance between which skills are worth taking alongside which version of said skills to choose is actually pretty interesting. I had to make some tough choices thanks to the numerous varied skills on offer. There's even a further progression system unlocked around level 15, God Skills. This massive progression tree is unique to each character, offering new passive and active abilities with plentiful ways to build your character. The skill system overall is actually undoubtedly one of the game's strengths, and it'll be where hardcore fans end up tweaking and fine-tuning their builds. The range of options available led to my combat approach regularly evolving throughout the game. Each character though only uses a single weapon from beginning to end. Again, this lack of variety rears its ugly head. Your Wood Elf Scout will only ever use a bow, and your Empire Soldier will only ever use a sword and a shield. For me, this affects build diversity at a core level that simply feels like a missed opportunity. I'm the kind of player that loves tinkering with playstyles. Making a sword-based ranger or a dual-wielding soldier is an interesting challenge that simply just isn't possible here. We also encountered numerous bugs throughout our time with the game, from silent voiceovers to an invisible wall in the middle of a quest which only affected my co-op teammate. Luckily, a cutscene minutes later teleported him away. There's numerous little things like allied health bars won't appear when you enable the option in settings. However, if you toggle health bar via summons, that does make them appear. Oops. There's also no ability to turn on the names of loot items from range, instead only appearing when you get close to them. It's a little quality of life change that I would really like to see here. Each area in the game features a unique boss battle with numerous phases. Whilst the difficulty spike is surprisingly large, the approach to these bosses almost feels like mini raid encounters from an MMO. Each boss requires you to learn their attacks, figure out an effective strategy and then execute it, and we had a blast playing these, particularly in co-op. I'd argue these are some of the best boss battles found in any action RPG. Thankfully the game's graphics actually look pretty great overall too, with nice lighting and visual effects on offer. The developers have clearly focused on performance here over resolution on the consoles, and that's undeniably the correct choice. Chaosbane runs at a fairly solid 60 FPS with little problem maintaining it, even when vast numbers of enemies and effects are popping off on screen. It'd be nice to see a higher resolution and improved IQ, but the game's smooth performance is far more important and goes a long way in helping to make that combat feel as good as it does. We did encounter some pretty nasty screen tearing throughout the entire game playing on an Xbox One X though, which does need pointing out. Some areas were significantly worse than others. Chaosbane doesn't try to invent the wheel. It's a fairly by the numbers action RPG with some excellent combat and a great skill system that's clearly let down by a lack of variety in not just loot and environments but enemies and more. There's numerous modes to keep players interested even after the main story ends, such as Boss Rush, which is pretty self-explanatory, expeditions with randomly generated levels, and relic hunts which generate a random map, enemies and a boss of increasing difficulty for rewards such as powerful heroic gear sets. The developers have built an extremely solid foundation here. Warhammer Chaosbane could be one of the action RPG greats. There's a hell of a lot to like here. The core feel of the game is fantastic, but some of those trappings surrounding it could use further refinement and variety. Echo Software have already outlined numerous upcoming free updates, alongside paid season pass content including new difficulties, modes, loot sets, skills, quests, areas and more. I just hope the team continue to refine and build upon what they've created, much like Blizzard did with Diablo 3's infamous Loot 2.0 update and Reaper of Souls expansion. Is Warhammer Chaosbane worth buying? Absolutely. I purchased the game with my own hard-earned cash despite receiving a copy from the publisher. It is great fun, particularly in co-op. Does it stand amongst the ARPG greats? Probably not right now. Could it though? Undoubtedly. The game is a diamond in the rough that holds a myriad of promise. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and hit that bell button for notifications when we upload further videos. It really helps the channel a lot.